everybody. It's the Plant-Based Business Hour. I'm Elysabeth Alfano. So great to have you with me. So what's it going to take to get animals out of the supply chain? And I don't just mean the food supply chain, but I also mean the material supply chain. My next two guests today have their finger on the pulse like nobody else in the business. I want to bring in Stephanie Downs, who's the co-founder of Material Innovation Initiative. And I also want to bring in Macy Marriott, who is the managing director of Glasswall Syndicate. So great to have you both with me.
Great to be here.
Well, thank you for doing all that you do, of course. And I first want to get into the very basics so everybody knows exactly what you do. So can we start with you, Macy? Tell me exactly what Glasswall Syndicate is and just how prolific the applications are that pass your desk.
Yeah, absolutely. So Glasswall Syndicate, we are the largest plant and cell-based investment network in the world. We started in 2016. We were pioneered by Stray Dog Capital, which is one of the most prominent investors in the plant-based and cell ag space, really recognizing that there was an opportunity for us to focus on collaboration, and that 2016, the landscape looked entirely different than it does now. The amount of startups looked different, but also the amount of investors that were specifically focusing on companies removing animals from the supply chain. It was very few at the time. And so Stray Dog kind of realized that there could be a platform that existed in which entrepreneurs got the opportunity to pitch in front of a large group of mission-aligned investors all at once, instead of having to set up 20, 1-hour intro calls and 10 1-hour exploratory secondary calls. We could really streamline that process and help entrepreneurs. But then from an investor perspective, there's so much value in being able to go through a diligence process with other investors that are interested in that same opportunity. You can go a lot wider in your diligence. You can go a lot deeper in your diligence. You can share the fees associated with technical reports, share legal fees, and just really tap into each other's expertise and experience. And so what started with a handful of members grew to 50 members, and then 100 members, and then 150 members. And we have since passed 175 investor members, which is incredible. We are technically a nonprofit. Not everybody knows that. We're a 501c6. We are on a mission to get more capital deployed into this space. And our applications, it's been absolutely incredible since the beginning, but especially just given this pandemic, that there is still so much innovation happening, and there are so many applications that are incredibly exciting right now. I know we'll get into all this, so I don't want to go into too much detail right away, but I will say, we just had this micro pitch event. We hadn't done something like that before. We usually have bi-monthly pitch days for our members, and then those investors who are all interested in the same opportunity will spin out into deal teams and have volunteer deal leaders, and a 6 to 8 week process towards potential funding. But we decided, okay, being an entrepreneur is really hard. Being an entrepreneur that's fundraising is incredibly hard. Being an entrepreneur that's fundraising during a global pandemic, that is just uncharted territory for a lot of these co-founders and founders. And so we said, let's open up that funnel a little bit. We usually only have 4 companies at our pitch day. Let's do 14. Let's have 14 companies present, and they were just shorter pitches. And we did this micro pitch event, and the amount of overall interest was greater than even our normal pitch day. The deal teams were larger, the amount of participants were larger, and that just really perpetuated and I think really exemplified the data that's telling us plant-based is doing okay, and it is. So I'm just really excited to be here today and share more about Glasswall and dive into this conversation with the two of you. So thank you so much for having us.
Yes, it's so wonderful. Okay, so just some brief overview there. Basically, what you do is you bring together entrepreneurs and you bring together investors. And both of those parties have an interest in getting animals out of the supply chain usually. But now, as we're seeing, there's this tailwind with COVID. And so more and more investors are getting into the plant-based marketplace, perhaps not really with animals in mind. Perhaps they're having the bottom line in mind, which is fine. There's that too. But you're just seeing this growing interest in investing in plant-based products. And Glasswall Syndicate Syndicate is really the matchmaker that makes that happen. So wonderful to have you with me, Macy. Okay, so Stephanie, for those who might not know, what is the Material Innovation Initiative, and talk about the work that you're doing. And then we're going to get into this conversation about what kind of innovation are both of you seeing coming down the pipeline, because you see so many entrepreneurs and startups who are trying to make a difference in this space. But tell us first, what is Material Innovation Initiative?
Sure, absolutely. Well, for anybody who knows the food space, which is the space that I came from, and my co-founder, Nicole Rawling, if you know what the Good Food Institute is, then think GFI for materials, and that's what the Material Innovation Initiative is. So, Nicole and I both really saw the power of the work that the Good Food Institute had done. For me personally, when I was looking at starting Bruce Friedrich actually encouraged me to start a company in this space, which is how I ended up starting a plant-based meat company in India called Good Dot. And then Nicole actually ran all of GFI's international programs. So we really saw this power of this entity that was essentially, I think the best way to describe it is an industry builder. So those who don't know the Good Food Institute, this type of entity that we started with the Material Innovation Initiative is really kind of the center point to help spawn more innovation and research in vegan materials to ultimately bring products to market for the industry. So we work with entrepreneurs, we work with investors, we work with brands, we work with R&D teams at universities, and are just out there planting seeds. And then when the entrepreneurs need some help, we're connecting them with people and just being kind of that go-to, that central hub that can bring everybody together, which the Good Food Institute did such an amazing job of that, quite frankly, we wanted to replicate that process for materials. And I've spent about 13 years working in vegan materials, doing on the corporate side for PETA, the animal rights group. I've done corporate outreach for them. And so I know that, brands are actively looking for more materials, and we're not delivering, which for me as a longtime activist is killing me. So we need more materials out there. So that's why we started this.
Okay. So again, sort of to summarize so that we can just kick off the conversation, I say this is probably not 100% accurate. I think of both the Good Food Institute and Material Innovation Initiative almost as think tanks. It's not exactly accurate, but you are housing and fostering research projects to get more data that can be given to both investors and to entrepreneurs to really help them make that connection to go to the next step, or to start that business, or to get that next innovation to the marketplace. So now let's talk about the marketplace, because both of you, of course, have your finger on the pulse with Glasswall Syndicate, seeing so many new entrepreneurs come to the table for investing, and Material Innovation Initiative, seeing so many materials. We think of
Elizabeth, I'm so sorry. I can't hear you. I can hear Stephanie. I'm so sorry. I can't hear you.
You can't hear me at all.
I hear Stephanie perfectly clear.
Okay, let's see if did it go out? Did it hop out? Okay. So
I can hear you. I can hear everybody. So I'll just repeat everything. No, I'm kidding.
That's so weird. It's Stephanie. I can hear you perfectly clear.
Okay. Stephanie, can you tell her to hop out and get back in?
Macy, can you go ahead and hop out and come back in? Let's see if that makes it better.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
we're going to,
so sorry, hold on.
In the meantime, we can talk
we're going to keep
materials.
going. Yes. So, I think most people like me, when I think about getting animals out of the supply chain, I think about food. But really what I'm learning from your site, and I want to encourage everyone to go to materialinnovation.org. I've been saying the wrong thing. Materialinnovation.org, about what kind of environmental impact plant-based or animal-based materials have. And I didn't realize it was so high. And I didn't realize that animals are actually birthed and put in horrible conditions for materials. I thought they were a byproduct of food.
Yeah, no, a lot of people don't think about it. So when we think about materials, you can break it down into pretty much 6 categories. And that's leather, wool, fur, silk, down, and exotic skins. And thank you. And so and many animals, well, for example, silk is one. Over 1 trillion silkworms are raised every year and boiled alive, really just for their skin. And the same with exotic animals is another really interesting one that I've really been diving into a lot recently. It's 2.5 million animals, which if you look at that compared to the food chain, doesn't seem like a lot, but these animals are primarily carnivores. So we've estimated that around 2 billion animals are used to feed those carnivores to ultimately make that skin. So it's a lot of impact. And also if you look, and one of the reasons we were so excited to get this going is the fashion industry and automotive in particular are really aggressively looking for better materials because of the sustainability aspect. So it's not necessarily an animal welfare issue, but if you look at the top 5 most environmentally impactful materials that are used in the fashion industry, animal materials are make up 4 of the top 5. So it's, people talk a lot about cotton and things, but if you really look at animal materials, the impact is enormous.
So I had no idea about this. And you see from this JPEG that we have silk being the number 1 environmental impact, then alpaca wool, then leather, and then number 5 being regular wool. The fact that alpaca wool is so damaging, I'm very surprised, as opposed to lamb wool. Why would that be?
Well, it's, and a lot of that data is pulled from an organization called the Higg Index. And, a lot of times we're not just looking at, the animals being grown or, the waste, but we're also looking at what they have to be fed in order to raise them. So like, for example, with silkworms, they eat mulberry leaves as their primary food. And those are extremely water intensive trees to grow. And so, the environmental impact on that is enormous. And the same with, the alpaca or other wool, the waste that they produce, the tanning that has to be done to the skins or the dyeing of the materials. There's just so many aspects people don't think about.
Wow. Macy, you're back with us. I'm so happy. Can you hear us?
I am back. I'm so sorry. Can you hear me okay?
I got you.
Awesome.
We got you. So we're just going to keep rolling. Okay. So this is good because we wanted to get a little bit of background on the environmental damage from animal-based materials, which I think a lot of people didn't know. And that, in fact, they're not byproducts of food. They actually are created and causing damage for obviously the animals and the environment.
Co-products. Yeah.
Toe products.
Co-products.
Yeah, co-products. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so environmentally damaging both from food and from materials. So starting with Macy, since she's got audio, what can you tell us about what you're seeing down the pipeline? We all know about the plant-based burger. Yeah, we got the memo. And we're starting to hear about things like plant-based bacon, but you see so many applications from entrepreneurs who are requesting funding come to your desk. What are we going to be seeing 6 months out from now?
Seafood, which I am personally incredibly excited about. So you'll notice a trend at conferences starting about 18 months ago. People were starting to give a lot of presentations on what they were seeing and presentations on white spaces in the alt protein sector. And a reoccurring theme of that was seafood. And entrepreneurs were listening. They were definitely listening, and their wheels were turning. And so we're starting to see a huge influx of applicants and early stage companies that are wanting to tackle seafood, which is incredible because we've gone into this before, but from a sustainability perspective, from a health perspective, from an animal welfare perspective, I mean, seafood has been a long time coming, and there's so many different applications, and we're really excited about it. I think another element is we always talk price, taste, convenience, right? Price, taste, convenience. You hear it probably on every podcast, someone mentions price, taste, convenience. But one of the things that we're really starting to see a lot of is entrepreneurs that are tackling price. That's a huge one. There's a lot of great products out there. We know that people are buying them. But at the end of the day, a lot of these companies are still very much in a premium category. And so in order to make this mainstream, the price is gonna have to come down. So we're seeing a lot of startups that are really starting to think about, their co-manufacturing agreements and how to bring the cost down for ingredients, how they can get better margins, so they can not just become price parity with its animal-based counterparts, but maybe even beat it. So lots of seafood, lots of companies focusing on price. And then we are seeing more companies that are focusing on, thicker textured cuts, more like a steak. We've got the burger down. There's some really great burgers out there, but just taking it to the next level and really having that, experience mimicked for a steak product. So lots of exciting things that we're seeing come across our desk recently.
Yeah, I just tried the Meaty Steak, Meati, out of Colorado, which is really a mushroom-based steak, but it was really thick and everything was just the experience you would have of a steak. So I agree. You're going to see a lot of those kind of products come down the pipeline, not the grounded foods, not the broken up foods like a hamburger or a stuffed sausage, but really something like steak. And then seafood is, our oceans have been fished out to capacity something like 7 times, according to National Geographic photographer Paul Nicklin. So we have overtaxed the oceans. I think everybody knows this at this point. So it is about time to see some plant-based seafood. In fact, next Thursday, everybody tune in. The Plant-Based Seafood Company will be right here on the Plant-Based Business Hour. But Stephanie, what are you seeing in materials come down the line? I've had in Vegconomist, I've seen great articles about Adidas getting on with vegan leather for their gym shoes. What kind of things are we going to see coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, and I think the area that we're seeing the most innovation right now is in the plant-based leathers. So we're seeing a lot of fruit leathers, leather made from byproducts of the wine industry, apple peels made from the byproducts of the apple juice industry. We're seeing that a lot. But quite frankly, we need a lot more innovation in this space, which is why we wanted to start In My Eye back when we were first contemplating it a little over a year ago. We literally did a side-by-side comparison of where the vegan food space was when GFI started and where this segment is right now. And it was a little bit creepy how similar it was as far as, like where we were at and the amount, like if you look at our landscapes on our site, there are companies out there, but we need a ton more. But we're definitely seeing the most innovation coming in plant-based leathers. And then we have people are also moving on the fur side to go more bio-based. And that's something we've seen a lot in this industry, as a vegan, you probably know, over the last 10 years, things like handbags and fur trims and things, a lot of the materials have become much closer quality wise to the real thing. But unfortunately, a lot of them are petroleum based. They're made out of plastic, which for those of us who are vegan, we don't necessarily, that doesn't bother us necessarily. But there's a huge, in the fashion movement, if you're trying to lower your environmental footprint, having things that are made out of plastic are a real challenge. So we're also seeing people working on, for example, faux furs that might be made with recycled plastics or, leathers that are made. So, there's lots going on with circularity and, trying to figure out how to, do a good quality product, but also have it be environmentally positive.
So when you're looking at interior car leathers like Tesla or Mercedes-Benz, and they've both had big advertising campaigns about how their interiors are now vegan, would those be petroleum based?
Yes. So, yeah. So, I know, so I worked on the Tesla campaign. They were one of my accounts at PETA. I actually went to the shareholder meeting and had a little chat with Elon. And so,
well, all right.
in front of 5,000 of our closest friends. And so, so they, I know originally, at least the company that they were working with was a petroleum based, but I also know that particular company has, they've recently launched like what we call a blended formula where they're using some plant-based and some that is still petroleum. So everybody, even the big players, are moving in that direction.
Sure. And I understand this because it really ultimately is better for the bottom line to have more environmentally safe products. That really is down the line. If you are a CEO who's willing to look not just at your tenure, but tenure of the company down the line, then you really want to make that happen. I've been seeing headlines where plant-based leather is about to be a $90 billion industry. Do I have that right? Again, from Vegconomist magazine.
Yep. Yeah, there's a research report put out by a firm out of Asia, 89 billion. They're projecting by 2027. And right now the market's around 29 billion. But I will say of that 29 billion, the majority of that, again, is a petroleum-based material, which I'm not trying to dog around like in general, if an animal's saved, that's a win for me. But, the plant-based leather space is a fraction of that. I mean, but at the same time, the opportunity in this space is enormous. The fashion industry is a $1.7 trillion industry. And, the leather space, as far as animal leather, is an $80 billion industry. And so it's, there's a ton of opportunity in this space, and investors are definitely excited to get into it.
Well, yeah. So I want to ask you both. I'll start with Macy, but coming back to Stephanie as well. So what are you seeing that gets investors mostly energized and ready to whip out their wallet. And is it going to be cellular? And Stephanie, I'll ask you, is that what you mean by bio is cellular? Okay. So are you seeing investors get more excited about cellular bio activity or just regular plant-based innovation? Macy.
Yeah, so we have investors that are excited about both. I think when we think about the plant-based category and we think about cell-based, this is part of the same vision. They're working in parallel. And so when I sit there and I think about consumers, 10 years from now, and they're making their decisions on what they're going to order at that restaurant, in my mind, you got plant-based options and you got cell-based options, and that's the only option, right? That's my goal. And so, we see investors that are excited in both. We do have some investors that aren't investing in cell-based and they're exclusively focusing on alt protein, and we have some that are, the other way around. But we do know that, alt protein in general, it has the investment dollars in 2020, like in the first quarter of 2020, were more than all of the investment dollars in alt protein in 2019. Yes. So we were one quarter in and we're like, man, we're already, so we know it's exciting. And yes, our investors are very much excited about both of those. I think it comes down to an educational component as well. And that's why the Good Food Institute and MII are so important, because as far as a plant-based business, it's a little bit easier for people to come in without a lot of investing experience and understand. There is some level, learning curve about the manufacturing process and margins and distributors and all of these things, but it's a little bit easier to understand. When you come in brand new, cell-based, you're going to need some resources. And GFI has done an incredible job of that. And Stephanie's actually been our guest presenter at a couple Glasswall Syndicate meetings before, because investors are really excited about everything that Stephanie is focused on, but they're probably hearing it for the first time from her. And so really understanding the industry, understanding the challenges, the timeline, the differentiators. Stephanie talks a lot about petroleum-based, like, should we be investing in those? Shouldn't we be investing in those? Where does that play in the larger landscape? What does this look like 5 years from now? Those were all questions that we were asking ourselves about alt protein, a few years ago. And now we're asking them about materials. And so having people like Stephanie who are able to educate investors, so we're making really great diligence efforts and being able to really evaluate that and be strategic investors for those entrepreneurs too. That's really important to us. It's not just about getting into the round, signing the check and saying good luck. Especially on the alt protein side, it's always been incredibly important for us to make sure that our investors are value add on that cap table. They're well connected. They understand the challenges. They are able to give insight and perspective and data. And Stephanie kind of is the first person to open that door for us, and we're really excited about it.
Yeah, it is very exciting. I want to throw it to Stephanie here for a second. We were talking about, Macy was saying, well, you've got to understand the timelines, and cellular is still pretty far from market. Is that the same that you're seeing with materials? What kind of timeline is it going to take to get biomaterials to the market?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a similar. We're not seeing the growth yet in the materials on the cellular side as much as we are on the food side. So, I think hopefully that'll be great for our side. A lot will get figured out in food, and then maybe we can apply that. But the other thing that's interesting about what we're, materials, is that this isn't something that a consumer has to put in their mouth, right? So, ultimately, what we're trying to do is we're creating something that's more sustainable. It has the look and the feel of leather or wool or fur and the functional properties, but it doesn't, we can use all kinds of other types of materials because we don't necessarily have to worry about meeting FDA or USDA regulations, that type of stuff. So, but I will say if I had to say where we're seeing some of the biggest growth is a lot in mycelium, which I think is, kind of the food side as well. Yeah, we're seeing it on the food side. We're also seeing it on the materials side, that people are just using that in all kinds of different creative ways. But so we are seeing certainly some cellular where I'm sure you've heard of them, Vitro Labs, and I know Corium, presented it before. We're seeing some of that where they're doing it in a culture, in their cell culture, but not as much as growth for us that we're seeing in the plant-based or mycelium, categories.
Yeah, so I would add to what Macy was saying about seafood. I would say seafood mushrooms, seafood mushrooms, because you are seeing so much
That's
going
true.
on. And I don't want to, I'm getting off a little bit out of tangent, but I don't want to forget fermentation and microbes.
Yeah.
I'm seeing more and more about algae, which is this high protein microbe that can be used as an alternate to pea protein, for example. So as plant-based products look to grow beyond using protein isolate or pea protein, there are other things that are coming down the pipeline like algae and microbes and fermented microbes, which I think is very interesting. So all this to say, so many options beyond animal products. Clearly all interesting, all environmentally sound, most of them, although not the petroleum-based materials. But so very interesting times. I'll throw it back to Macy. What are some of the hurdles that you're seeing that we're not able to, because here you've got COVID, this enormous tailwind that's coming. We were talking before going live that there's an Archer Daniels Midland study that says 18% of new people are coming to try plant-based options during COVID, and that 92% of that 18% is going to stay with it beyond COVID, if we ever get beyond COVID. So you're seeing this tailwind come with COVID for people wanting to feel better and get better care of their health so that if they do get sick, they are protected. So a lot of that is getting meat and dairy out of your plate. What are we seeing down the pipeline here that, is going to be a hurdle to this tailwind we have?
Yeah, I mean, a hurdle to COVID, to kind of this positivity. What is the kind of downside to it in the long term? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Just what is keeping us from having exponential growth? Are there any? So one of the things that I see is you've got all these
co-packers.
Yeah, so you've got all these wonderful, and I think it's the same for materials. You've got these wonderful entrepreneurs. You've got incredible creativity. You've got wonderful innovation. You've got all these great ideas. You've got one-for-one replacements for burgers, sausages, etc. Now, who's going to make all of this stuff? And it's not the same factory that can make meat, and it's not the same machinery that can make meat. So we've got the innovators, but now who's going to make it all? So that's one hurdle that I see. I don't know, Macy, if you're seeing other hurdles. I don't think money is a hurdle. I think the money's there.
The money is there, which is good. It was speaking of cell-based, I think in the longer term, that's definitely something that we are having to be strategic about, though, because as they're starting to raise much larger rounds, they're going to outgrow the check size of these mission-aligned investors that were able to participate at their pre-seed, seed, Series A. So that's definitely a hurdle that we're constantly evaluating. And I know Mark Warner, he was a presenter at one of our Glasswall meetings because we were talking about how do we commercialize this? What does this actually look like? How are we getting it out of these, small kind of test labs into large scale, and all the capital infusion that is going to be necessary for that? Who are those check writers? How do we get, validated third-party independent test results that, reconcile to what is being innovated within the lab? And there's some of these challenges that we're constantly thinking about for long-term capital needs for cell-based companies. For plant-based companies, similar to, from the food side, similar to what Stephanie was saying with textiles, is co-manufacturers. And especially now that we are starting to see the need for differentiation is greater than ever. The categories are starting to get not crowded. I hate when people say they're getting crowded. There's room for them. I don't know if you guys have seen animal-based categories. There's room for multiple plant-based players. I wouldn't say that it's too crowded, but I would say that the need to really differentiate is extensive. I mean, that's the first thing an investor is going to ask you is, how is your company different than these 7 other applications that I'm looking at? And so the hurdle that they have to come over is a lot of times creating specifically engineered equipment that allows them to produce either quicker, cheaper, and that specifically engineered equipment typically is going to make more sense in a facility as opposed to a co-manufacturer, but that's expensive. There's some downside to that. You're going to capital infusion early on. And co-manufacturers in general, I mean, we talk about it on a lot of different layers, but if you're a startup looking for a co-manufacturer, you're really early, there is a perfect sweet spot to finding it, right? Like, you get out of the commercial kitchen, you go from, trying to like instead of making the product, you're moving the product, and the co-manufacturer takes that off of you, so you're not having to focus on being in the kitchen. You can focus on actually driving turns, because a lot of these co-manufacturers are going to have minimum runs, and you want to make sure that you have enough product market data to prove that when you get to this co-manufacturer, you're going to have the turns, that you're not having an issue with those minimum runs. And finding the right co-manufacturer can be challenging. It's very much trying to identify your significant other is kind of how I like to think about it. And I would also say, just a little caveat is, as you start to look for a co-manufacturer, really making sure you're taking a deep look at those contracts, making sure that your legal team is looking over them, because the first thing that we're going to ask for when you tell us that you have a co-manufacturer is we want to see that co-man agreement, and we want to send it off to our own legal team, and we want to have a look at it and just make sure that all the protections and provisions are in place. But I think some of those challenges are probably very similar for materials, right, Stephanie?
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I just want to unpack that a little bit, because for some viewers, we just have gone through a lot of information. So basically what you're saying is that there is this bottleneck. So we have all these entrepreneurs, but we don't really have enough co-manufacturing relationships. And I'm not sure that there are enough co-manufacturing plants out there actually for plant-based items, because it can't be the same plants as meat. So, some producers are finding themselves, like Good Catch, saying, okay, fine, we'll just put down the money and make our own manufacturing plant. Although that's not initially what they wanted to do, because it is so incredibly expensive. But ultimately, that's the decision they had to make for themselves. And not everybody can do that because of the expensive outlay. So that is really a bottleneck that is coming to the forefront. So I know everybody sees the sexy headlines in Vegconomist magazine, but I often wonder, do we actually need more plant-based products right now? Or would it be better for people to actually start focusing on a co-manufacturing plant investment? And I was talking to investor Adam Slutsky, and he was saying we're actually looking at building manufacturing plants, because maybe that's where we're better served now. Right. And maybe that's where the business is. So that's something to think about. But Stephanie, I'd love to hear from you as well. Like Macy said, are you having these same kind of bottleneck issues for large scale? Because basically we're talking about scaling up, so for large scale manufacturing.
Yeah, I mean, definitely materials. I mean, I went through it personally in the food space, where, we ended up building a factory in India because we couldn't find a co-packer, and, importing with a partner was impossible. So I've personally been through it, and always interesting to build a factory immediately when you start a company. So yeah, I understand. I so sympathize with the investors who are going through that, and we are seeing something very similar in the space with materials, even more so from the standpoint that co-packing, as we know it in the food space, doesn't really exist in the in the material space. I mean, you've got, you have mills, for example, that will make your yarns, or, they do in some spaces, but, if you're a plant-based leather company, just nothing like that exists out there. And, even worse than you've got your own, proprietary equipment and stuff, so definitely. And then, so we're seeing that, I would say, on the plant-based side. And then on the cellular side, the biggest challenge, they've got through some of the R&D, like, for example, with spider silks and stuff that we're seeing, a lot of various companies have gone through R&D on that, but getting it to the price point that they can commercialize it is a real challenge. So again, the parallels between food and materials, I was really shocked when I stepped back and kind of looked at it big picture, such similar challenges.
But I do want to clarify for people, because it's a misconception, and I had the same misconception. While there is this parallel, it is not a direct correlation. So it is not because we have animals in the food supply chain that we therefore have materials from animals. They are indeed separate. So if you solve the food problem, you have not solved animals in the materials supply chain. Right. So we need to actually solve both. And it's both a food answer and a materials answer. So, but I am encouraged that materials is following the food space in that we're finding solutions. So you are expecting that you will as well, and you'll see the same kind of growth trajectory, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, an interesting thing to throw in there is, again, back to that comment I made earlier about a co-product. Like, people don't realize, by moving away from vegan materials, what an impact we can have on the food space. As far as, like, for example, leather is the number one most profitable byproduct of the byproducts that are sold from a cow, and it makes up, they estimate about 7% of the overall profit of the cow. Now, the margins are so tight in the beef industry as it is. If we can take out 7% of the profit by removing leather from the equation, that'll have a huge impact. And so, yeah, there's just some incredible opportunities. And I joke that I believe that that we're going to be living in a world where we're wearing and sitting and sleeping on all vegan things before we're eating all vegan food, and it has nothing to do with how food companies or investors or GFI. I mean, I think everybody's just killing it in that space, doing such a great job. The reality is the customers just don't care. Nobody has an emotional attachment to their wool sweater. So as long as we, so as long as we can, as we can provide materials that have the same look and feel and touch, I think that the consumer barriers to entry are much less.
I see what you're saying. I was going to say, I do have a reaction to wool. And so when I walk into a clothing store, I say, well, here, for example, I walked into Chinese Laundry the other day and I said, show me your vegan shoe section. And they said, we don't have a vegan shoe section. And I said, oh, that's such a shame because I'm here to buy 3 or 4 pairs of shoes and I'm now walking out. And they said, no, it's okay. We'll make you a vegan shoe section. And so she went through, and I love this woman. And so I did buy 5 pairs of shoes. She went through and she went under, looked under each shoe, and there's a mark. So you as a consumer, because I always say this on this show, you are an empowered voice. You do not have to hold a sign on a street corner, although you can do that too, but you can use your dollars, your purchasing power to make your voice heard. And I wanted to make sure that they knew that I did not want leather, and it is marked on every shoe. So you can easily see what is leather and what is not. And then I was able to buy that which is not leather. And I do the same thing when I walk into Limited Express or whatever. I say, if this is wool, I don't want it. Like, where's your other stuff? So, and I don't think I realized the impact of silk. There's again, we have a JPEG here of the impact that silk has. And I didn't really realize that silk was the #1 environmentally damaging material. So even silk is something to consider, everyone. Well, okay. So great. Let me get out of this. Well, so what are we going to see, let's say, short-term and long-term predictions for the future? Macy, what are you seeing the next 3 to 5 years out?
Yeah, 3 to 5 years out, I think that we will have fully integrated our grocery stores. I don't think the vegan penalty box is going to exist anymore.
Yes.
And I know that some people who are plant-based consumers, they talk about that they like being able to go into the store and it being in one location. And I certainly understand that. But right now, we definitely call it the vegan penalty box. It's all about full integration in the future when you go grocery shopping. I mean, the reality is, and we talk about this a lot, I think being in Kansas does give me a unique perspective. We always say there's the standard American diet, and then being in the Missouri area, it's like the Missouri American diet, which is, instead of sad, it's mad. I mean, it's just crazy. The consumer thought process for purchasing here in the Midwest, I think, is a little bit different. And so people like my grandpa, I am not going to probably get him to walk into a grocery store and go straight to that plant-based section. But I do think that if he's passing the chicken nuggets and he sees an Alpha chicken nuggets bag, he might go, my granddaughter talked about these, and I really do believe that. I mean, we know that it's millennials and it's Gen Z that is driving a lot of these consumer purchase decisions, but also they are teaching up. They are teaching their parents, like they are telling them about sustainability issues and environmental issues and health and animal welfare. And so I think we'll see that vegan penalty box gone. It's just going to be, you're going to be able to reach consumers that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to reach because they're just going to see it. And that is part of being mainstream. We say plant-based is mainstream, and I think we're getting there, but plant-based is not mainstream until every person that walks down that milk aisle sees, alternative milks too. And so that's my 3 to 5 year window. In the longer term, I mean, I do think that in time I witness the end of industrialized animal agriculture. Absolutely. I think it happened in a generation. I think it will unhappen in a generation. I think that if I, am on my deathbed and we've gotten rid of factory farming, then I was a win.
Yes. I see your animals out of the supply chain and I raise you. I think it's going to happen in my lifetime. So I think it's going to happen long before your lifetime. It's happening in my lifetime. I just want to say two things there. You're talking about when plant-based items come out of the penalty box. I love that. So studies have shown this. Actually, the Plant-Based Food Association and Kroger together did a study that when they put plant-based foods right next to other items in the meat counter, I guess you'd call it, which I think is no longer going to be called the meat counter. It's going to be called the protein case. Yes. You see that 29% made more plant-based purchases when they could find it, basically is what they're saying. And then in the Midwest, it was higher. It was 32. I'm sorry. Nationally, it was 23. And in the Midwest, it was 32. So when people, and you see, so even in the Midwest, where there is such a meat culture, they're underserved more than anybody else, actually. So they're going for it at a higher rate. So I think that's wonderful. I also think that, grocery stores used to have all the power. You used to have to pay them slotting fees and it was hard to get into them. And from a plant-based perspective, it's very annoying because what that means is that then you have plant-based products in Brooklyn and San Francisco. Well, what good does that do? You need plant-based products distributed across the entire United States. And there would be, different rationales for different stores at Whole Foods or other organizations. But now with direct to consumer, so it's another tailwind coming out of COVID, there's a little less of the power kingdom that grocery stores used to have, as lots of food manufacturers, not just plant-based, but other food manufacturers, go direct to consumer. So I think you're going to see grocery stores coming around to negotiating and being more open to keeping foods, out of the penalty box and into the meat case as all food manufacturers get more power, basically, because they don't have to rely solely on the grocery store. What are your predictions, Stephanie, down the line, 3 to 5 years and then the future?
I think in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to start seeing a lot more startups in this space. We at Material Innovation Initiative, we've been getting a lot of calls from VCs and startups. So there's just so much to be done as far as like wool is a completely wide open category where we need more innovators, exotic skins. We need more in fur, and so I think we're going to start seeing a flood of more entrepreneurs as people hopefully start to get woke up more about this space, and also. The thing I would say is, the brands are they're looking for this so much that the business opportunity is undoubtedly there. I always joke that imagine when Bruce started GFI of Safeway and Burger King and all of them were in 2015, we're saying we're desperately looking for more plant-based meat. That's where we're at with materials. I mean, we've met with, 50, 60 global major brands from, Hermes to H&M to Nike to Patagonia. I mean, every one of these companies immediately got back to us and, is just literally dying to look for better materials. So the opportunity is there. So I think we're going to see a ton more entrepreneurs coming into the space. And then as far as long term, of course, I definitely, it's funny. I used to think I'd lay on my deathbed someday and probably see a world where we weren't wearing fur and maybe foie gras was no longer a thing. But I mean, the last 5 years have it's unbelievable. Like, it's such a cool time to be a vegan. I want a t-shirt that says I was vegan before it was cool. But I think we'll be looking back on a world where we're not using animals. Certainly not the way we are seeing it now. So fingers crossed.
Yes. And it's amazing to see those product replacements 1-for-1 in the marketplace. And it's so refreshing to hear young millennials and Gen Z say like, oh, I don't want that. That makes no sense to me. Why would I do it? You think, oh my God, you're getting it. You're actually getting it. I don't have to beat my head against the wall with, somebody who's like, oh, we always did it, so we should always do it. And, and then I have to say like, oh, do you still type on a typewriter? Really? Okay, you don't. So you don't have to keep eating meat either. I mean, so I don't have to have that conversation anymore about the typewriter.
Like that one.
Well, also, who stands in line for stamps? No, you use something called the internet. I mean, come on, God, all right. Okay, sort of on a personal note, I'll start with you, Macy, and then throw it to Stephanie. When was the moment you knew, that's it, I'm never going to eat meat and dairy again?
Yeah, so I was in high school debate, which I don't think will surprise anyone who knows me. And I competed in this event called Oratory, where you would write a research topic and you would share it and you would compete with it. And I was looking for a new research topic, and I was in my senior year of high school, and I started to do more research. And I think it's such a common story. I had no idea. And I think too, sometimes the challenge being in Kansas is that I do see fields of cows that look happy and there's like plenty of space. And so that's what I thought was in my head. And we know, like, statistically, 99% of meat is not coming from those small family farms, right? That's not what anybody is eating. But I think that association growing up this way did make it a little bit more challenging. And so when I started doing research and I found out about industrialized animal agriculture, how we're treating these animals, the environmental angle, the health angle, the sustainability, I mean, it was just, everyone says this, it was a rabbit hole. I mean, for days, I was like in my room on my laptop, like lights out, just going through all of this. And it was like, I just had no idea. And I think that most people, if they really took the time to look into it, would be so much more, you know, open to it, because I think I was probably one of the furthest things from being vegan at the time. Like, I would always say I would love to see an argument between my pre-vegan self and my post-vegan self. I think it was just so interesting.
Only you would think about arguing with yourself.
I was just going to say, now with COVID, you can just stay home and argue with yourself.
There you go.
Yes, absolutely. So I decided, like, I can't eat animal products anymore. So I actually told my mom, I was like, hey, I'm doing this research report. We can't, I was like, we can't eat animals anymore. And my mom, God bless her, she looked at me and she goes, if you go vegetarian, I'll go vegetarian. And I said, okay. And so it's
That's
like,
awesome.
how many people, right? Like, still working on grandpa from earlier, but mom was like right on board.
Awesome.
And so then I continued to like perfect this over some time and presented with it. And the more research I did, the more I found out about eggs and dairy. And I wish I could have, you know, said that when I found out more, I felt like empowered by it. But I honestly kind of was like, went home and was like, ah, shoot, mom, now I got to stop eating butter and eggs and milk, because it was all so new. And so she went vegan too. When I went vegan, she went vegan. We've been vegan for over a decade now. It's been awesome. So
well, we sure do love your mama. God. Awesome. Stephanie, what about you?
Yeah, my gateway drug was an animal, working at volunteering at an animal shelter. So I used to go every Saturday to walk dogs and help clean kennels and things like that. And every week I would, on my way home, I would stop at the same restaurant and I'd get a pork barbecue sandwich and, you know, sit and kind of decompress. And just one day I'm looking at the sandwich and I don't know, like the light bulb literally went on that I thought I spend, you know, 9 hours, you know, helping these dogs and cats and, you know, all that. And then I sit down and I eat a pig. And so then I went home and I did some, you know, Googled, and of course these horrible videos came up and I watched and that was that. So, and unfortunately I was married to a hunter at a time. So that was interesting. but yeah, so that was where it triggered for me. So next thing I know, I'm, you know, starting companies in this space, but no, it took many years, but I always joke that was my gateway drug that got me started down this amazing path.
Yeah, and the hunter's gone, so there's
the hunter's gone.
Bonus. Okay, and I'm wondering if you guys are having a bad day, and sometimes during COVID, people have been having a slew of them. What's the phrase you say to get yourself back in the game, Stephanie?
You sent this to us to kind of think about, and I got to laughing a little bit to myself because I love quotes. So I'm always
Me too.
intrigued by quotes. But the one that I would say that always makes me laugh the most, if I need a good laugh, was when I was a kid. I had this cork wall that my parents put in my bedroom, I think primarily to keep me from sticking holes in the other 3 walls that were in the room.
the same cork wall.
Okay, we must have been children of the 80s. And one day my mom came home, she found this, she was at the store and she came across this bumper sticker that she thought I would like. And so she got it for me. And that's why I think I really remember it coming from my mom. And it said, women who think they are equal to men lack ambition.
Oh, I like it. I like it. As only a female founder would say. Oh, I like it. Macy, what about you?
A quote that I really like is, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Because I've never felt inherently gifted in any of my passions, but I will work incredibly hard and I will get there. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because you're both so perfectly placed. So when I think of a successful entrepreneur, I don't think of the smartest or the most good looking or the most well connected. I think the person who's willing to work the hardest and the person who can make their money last the longest. And those are the people who usually come out ahead. So it's perfect that you have that quote and that you work with entrepreneurs. And Stephanie, I have a quote for you.
Yes.
If you are in that vein, let me see that I get it right. It's by, oh my gosh. Oh gosh, no, please, because it's right on the. I'm gonna say this is gonna kill me. Okay, someone out there is gonna be able to Google it, but it is well-behaved women don't change the world. So yes, Eunice Shriver. There we go, Eunice Shriver, the woman who started Special Olympics. So yeah, I love that. And then for you, Macy, because you like to work hard. It's not that you like to work hard, but since you're a hard worker, I always say nose to the grindstone, eyes to the sky. So I always have my sights on the vision for the future, but it is nose to the grindstone every day. Okay, well, we're talking about food ultimately in the end and materials as well. What is your favorite snack? Or if you don't have one, you can say like your go-to meal that you always make in 10 minutes. That's always great. Macy, what do you make for yourself at home or what do you snack on?
Well, it's no secret. So I also work for Stray Dog Capital in addition to having the honor of leading the syndicate. And we recently invested in a company called Barbecue. And they are doing a plant-based barbecue option. And being in Kansas City, which is like the first association people have, is with good barbecue. I have been ordering it like religiously. I put on my favorite barbecue sauce. I just put it on one of those pretzel buns. I think those are delicious. And it's been great. And I do feel like I have been able to convince some of my friends that were a little bit hesitant with those barbecue sandwiches. We're getting them on board. They're getting them.
That is so awesome. I also love barbecue. And they're an example of a company that is about to go direct to consumer, I believe. I know they're smaller than someone like Beyond Meat who is doing direct to consumer, but they have their sights on that kind of extra business funnel as well. What about you, Stephanie? What do you snack on or make yourself at home?
I was going to say, as long as it has microwavable instructions, it's right up my alley. So
that's why you work in materials.
The world's worst cook ever. So I think my go-to would be, I love the Alpha burritos. The Alpha Foods chicken burritos. Those are fabulous. So I think that would be my pick if I had to have something from the fridge.
Yes, microwavable indeed. I've found something called Cool Beans that I've been really liking as well. Kind of in the same category, handheld wrap or burrito that you can microwave and you are on your way. I love it. Well, I love to cook. So if anybody does want recipes, I'll just say go to elysabeth.com/recipes. I love to cook. Because I'm from Chicago. We're talking about this Midwestern group here from, St. Louis, Missouri and Kansas and Chicago. I love to make Chicago style Italian beef.
I was going to say deep dish pizza. If so, I'm coming to visit.
Well, Kitchen 17 in Chicago has the best deep dish pizza that's all vegan. So it is available. We do Chicago style deep dish pizza, Kitchen 17, which is great. But I like to make spicy Italian beef. I also make gyros. So I make lots of stuff. So
nice.
Well, I want to thank both of you for being with me and for all the work that you do. Here, these strong women leading the way. I just love it. Please go to materialinnovation.org. I really want you guys to see, first of all of the environmental damage that comes from animal-based materials. I did not know this myself, and it is not a byproduct of the food industry. Mm-hmm. It is its own torturous industry. And so if we want environmental change, if we want animals out of the supply chain, if those things don't ring true with your personal values, you want to see a difference, then you want to shift your dollars and how you spend them and start focusing on non-animal based materials. You can get much more information at materialinnovation.org, headed up, co-founded by Stephanie Downs. And then, Glasswall Syndicate, how we love you, Macy Marriott, the managing director there. You can go to glasswall.org. You don't have to be a super duper big investor to get involved and to put your money behind plant-based foods. Macy can walk you through all of it, but please go to glasswallsyndicate.org. Let me make sure I get that right. Glasswallsyndicate.org. You can get more information about even being a small investor and helping the plant-based economy move forward. And of course, even if you're not ready to do that, just buy plant-based. Just stick that plant-based burger in your
Exactly.
face. You
Every
are
meal
doing
makes a difference.
a wonderful job right there. I want to thank everybody. I'm going to say, Stephanie and Macy, don't go anywhere. Everybody else, thank you. I will be back tomorrow with another interview. Dr. Loomis, who used to be the doctor for the St. Louis Rams, another St. Louis team member. He's going to be with me on the Awesome Vegans interview series. I will see everyone tomorrow at 1 p.m. Stephanie and Macy said tight. Everybody else, see you tomorrow. Thanks for all you do. Together, we're taking back our health and the health of our bottom line.